did Taylor take the hand mic? Can I have that? I have like a compulsion to like move around all the time. It's on the chair behind. No, that's on the. It's plugged in. There we go. All right, thank you. Well, this is Cozy. Good morning. Hello. My name's Shiv Malik, and once again, I'm incredibly psyched to be here at Denver. Here last year, missed out in 2017, hated myself, had to go to therapy a lot, so I'm never missing it again. Thank you, John, Pala, Matt, the rest of the team. Can we get a round of applause for them? The guy who, goes around in the buffercorn suit, he needs an applause. Right, so I'm going to talk about data dignity, data unions, and how those two things work together. And here's how I'm going to structure this talk. The first thing I'm going to say is, I'm going to tell you who I am and how I got into data unions. 2, the state we're in with the data economy, and why owning your data is actually the last great hope for getting it all right. 3, then I'm going to set out why it's been such a nightmare to get data ownership for individuals. And it really has been a nightmare. 4, how we solved it. I'm going to boast. 5, I'm going to give you a working example of something that's already off the ground. It's already got 1,000 members. And finally, where next? Okay, all right, let me get stuck in. Let me tell you more about who I am. Matt, already glaring at me. What? For the lighting, okay, good, all right. So, 1, who am I? Well, I'm a former investigative journalist for The Guardian turned evangelist for the data economy, or a better, fairer data economy. This is me, back in 2012. I miss those chinos. I deleted my Facebook account in protest of Facebook's IPO, and for some reason that made the news. So they invited me on television to explain myself. How dare you delete your Facebook account? And I made the argument. They said, why did you do this? I made the argument. I said, look, I think we were all turned into, and the phrase I used was info slaves. Facebook has done this to us, and this is just enough. Mark Zuckerberg making another couple of billions out of this is just too much for me, and that's why I did that. And the newsreader made a really good retort. He said, look, Shiv, you've lost this argument. There are hundreds of millions of people who already joined Facebook, and now it's 2 billion, so I really have lost this argument. This is useless. You're just a lone voice. Fine, okay. And obviously, lots of other people have made far more eloquent protests. But that was back then, in 2012. And the one thing I realized was that if you're going to fight this, if you're going to fight Facebook, you have to fight tech with tech. But it wasn't clear what those solutions would be. So fast forward to 2017, and I joined a group of developers that made up an open source project called Streamr. And after pestering them for a while, they ended up building some underlying infrastructure as a sort of a side project, if you want, which potentially, I think, changes the data economy forever. And it's pretty mind-blowing. What they've done is to make a thing called a data union possible. Glenn Weil, does anyone know Glenn Weil here? Or Jaron Lanier? Yeah, that guy. They're from Microsoft Research, but they also freelance public intellectuals, if you want. They would call this sort of a MID, right? A mediator of individual data, which is a mouthful, which is why no one calls it a MID. But actually a more technical description, or a sort of, would be a kind of data cooperative. That's probably the right descriptor. But for those who aren't familiar, what the hell is a data union anyway? Okay. Well, it's probably perhaps the only way of finally enabling individuals to own and control the most valuable asset of the 21st century, information. And it might even take down Facebook, which is exciting. All right. This is the state we're in at the moment. I'm going to give you a ridiculously simplified version of the kind of visions of the data economy as they exist at the moment. The first, if you want, and there are plenty of visions and they're not necessarily conflicting. The first vision, if you want, is the open data idea, right? The idea that actually data should be free, we shouldn't put a price on it, everyone should have access to this, whether it's Google's information or your local government's information, it should all be on open databases that anyone can access, in a sense, right? And that's backed by the ODI and Tim Berners-Lee. That's his think tank that backs that kind of an idea. Then we have the kind of privacy or deaf people, and actually I'm guessing a lot of people in this room, and I would count myself as one of them at one point, believe in this idea. The notion that obviously we should be minimizing data, that individuals should be retaining as much information as possible and keeping it as private, encrypted, etc. as possible. And actually it's been a success in many ways, right? The EFF backs this kind of idea, Privacy International. So there's loads of backers intellectually speaking, and even more impressively, the technical, I don't have to go into all of this, but you know that the technical aspects have been challenging, but they're there. Actually, lots of people are using privacy-centric apps. We might poo-poo them, but like say Telegram is only popular because people think, at least, it's encrypted. So that's been very successful in many senses. And then obviously there's things like Firefox and DuckDuckGo, etc., etc. But the ownership idea, what's that about, right? Well, it says that, in a sense, you know, we should own our own data, and then by doing that, we can exercise those property rights. And actually that might give us a better sense of privacy, right? And it goes back to those older notions of privacy. I own my house, you can't come into it. I own my pieces of paper, the king can't take it from me, right? Rather than looking at privacy through the kind of more sort of post-war, the state will back human rights, a human rights notion of privacy. This is a very different notion of privacy. But if you use that framework, you're more likely to get privacy. And also then you end up with the kind of monetization aspect, which makes the economy a bit more interesting. So that's the notion of ownership. And I think the best articulations of the ownership idea have been about authorship, like akin to authorship rights. You know, I own this information, but I sublease it. I have moral rights over it. So it's not just like, you know, here's a car, you sell it, that's it, it's yours now, and it's gone, and I don't have anything to do with it anymore. So that's the notion of ownership. However, it's sort of the backing of this has been a bit disparate. Like, you know, the Yang Gang. Oh, Yang Gang is sad times. You know, Andrew Yang has backed this. Other people such as will.i.am, the musician. Of course, Jaron Lanier and Glenn Weil. I would stick into there, Yuval Hariri. But they're kind of a disparate group. There's no like think tank like the ODI or EFF or something like that, right? And worse than all, it's actually been a complete failure technically. They don't have any outputs, right? Where is the result of this? It's nowhere to be seen. Okay. Here's what we actually have, right? What is that? Does anyone know what that is? Hands up. Yes. You've seen the talk before. That doesn't count. All these people, they don't know what it is. Yeah. So Jeremy Bentham is an English philosopher. He came up with the notion of how to run a prison. And actually someone built this. And they still don't know who did that. I really should look up who actually built this. But that's a panopticon. I'm going to skip this bit because I think you guys know this, but basically, this is what we have at the moment. This is the best metaphor for the data economy at the moment, right? It's a world of data oligarchs and data serfs. Data oligarchs are Google, Facebook, Amazon, Twitter, Netflix, and they sit right at the center of all of this. And does anyone use the internet here? Does anyone use the internet here? Yeah? Seriously? People don't use the internet? Everyone put your hands up. Yes, there we go. Good, it's good exercise, you know? You all are over there, right? Being watched over. Okay, you guys all know this. I can skip that bit. Okay, and the government's in on this too, right? NSA, Snowden. I was in The Guardian when that story broke. It was fascinating to be there at that time. So you come up with a thing that Colorado governor said last night. You can't really trust. People have a sense that they can't trust not just big tech, but also the state when it comes to this stuff, right? It's happening. It's fascinating to hear the Colorado governor himself, in a sense, say that. So here's my argument on this. In every way, given that this is the reality we live in, I think it's fair to say that the open data movement and privacy have sort of failed miserably, right? They failed not because of the ideas not being right, but they failed strategically. They really failed, and there's people are going to disagree with this, and they should do. And I think we're worse off than ever, right? I think that's also patently clear. This is the society in terms of the data economy that we live in is probably the most unprivate society since, I don't know, Babylonian times, right? The invasions of privacy are phenomenal. The open data movement, in a sense, they have a flaw, which is they demand that the state enact these laws to open up these private data sets that belong to the big data behemoths, but they don't kind of realize the state and big tech are kind of aligned in many ways. So that's not an easy process, and they failed, I think. The privacy movement, privacy warriors here, right? Yes, go. We're losing souls all the time. We're losing souls all the time. We're in a position now where I think the cognitive overhead for maintaining your privacy is so high compared to the convenience offered, right, by Web 2, that, I think the point is proven. People are willingly paying Jeff Bezos to spy so he can spy on you. Please, I want to buy your microphones and put them in my house, right? That is a massive challenge. And I think data ownership points a way out of this, right? Okay. I don't have time to get into all of those arguments, and maybe we can talk about that afterwards, but the problem with ownership is it sucks. It sucks technically speaking. It's a massive technical challenge, right? So what are those technical challenges, right? Okay. Anyone know what that is? Apart from being a piece of paper. Okay, relevant. So this is a guy called Chris Downs in 2000, right? So he was the first person on the internet, if you want, to try and sell his own personal data. And he downloaded his data, and he stuck it on eBay, and he sold it. Does anyone know for how much for? $200. He got $200 for his personal data, right? For all of it. And I say download because I actually had to handwrite most of it, because that was such a long time ago. You couldn't get it in digital form. I don't know. Anyway, we're still in that position now, right? When it comes to trying to monetize your own personal data, how do you do it? Well, you have to basically stick it up on eBay, right? That sucks. Everyone knows it doesn't work. It doesn't scale. It's not going to go any further than that, right? So the first issue in setting up something for individuals is that you need a back-end network, right? You need a way of transporting your data from one place to another, right? And we've got roads and rails for, in a sense, corporations, but we don't have roads and rails for individuals to be able to do this kind of stuff, right? And this is, by the way, obviously ridiculously simplified. I'm not a dev, so I'm just going to go over this in a very basic way. The second thing is discovery, right? People need to find buyers for data, need to be able to discover that data. Rather like Chris Downs putting it on eBay, that's not a scalable solution, but you need a marketplace, and you need a way now of aggregating all that data with other people, right? So the buyers aren't going to Chris Downs and then someone else, and trying to negotiate with them individually. You need a way to aggregate it all. And the third thing is payment. Then you need a way of paying all these people, except the problem is obviously these are micropayments we're talking about, right? So maybe you can see your way through. Okay, I think we solved it. The Streamr team happened to be at this really weird conjunction of both real-time data and crypto. And therefore, they kind of had experience of all these things. In fact, back in the white paper, when you read it, is all about building a back-end, peer-to-peer, decentralized, real-time data network, right? In a sense, emulating some of the services that AWS provides. And so that's the heart of the project. But on top of that, they built a marketplace. And at first, that marketplace was just for business to business, right? So it wasn't meant for consumers in this way to sell. But we repurposed that, and that meant you can create products where individuals could aggregate their data and sell that as an individual product on the data marketplace. We're going to see that in a second. And the last bit was the experience with crypto. And in fact, exactly a year ago, on this stage, right here, the co-founder of Streamr stood and released Monoplasma, which is a way of making one-to-many payments. And it has to be a sidechain, and Ethereum doesn't obviously do micropayments either very well. So it's a sidechain solution, and it was launched here a year ago, minus 4 hours. So that's cool. And so that turns into the way of making those payments, right? So here's a kind of rough architecture once you put it all together. You have a data source coming in. The data travels through the network. When the buyer on the other side unlocks it, and at the same time simultaneously pays the data source through a smart contract, right? So it's a pretty simple setup, but it does mean that it's decentralized, and it does mean that it's sort of Web3. And that's really important, right? Because the other models for data ownership tend to be, oh, look, we're a centralized company, we'll take your data, and then we'll give you discounts, right? Or we'll give you these funny tokens that you can't do anything with, but we'll call them tokens or money, right? It's all bullshit. This is at least a genuine attempt at getting something where You're the data source, and you're directly interacting with the buyer here, and you're directly getting paid as well. So here's Swash. What is Swash? So a team has been building a data union for the last year. Actually, they saw our talk. Is that right? They saw our talk here when Henry did Monoplasma. They saw that talk, and they were like, shit, yeah, this is a great idea. We're going to make some money out of this. And it's very inspirational, and we're going to see what we can do with this. So great. So for the last year, they've been working away, and they've created Swash. We're going to see that in a second. And this is how Swash works. Basically, so they're based in Turkey. It's a browser plugin. It works on Firefox, Chrome, not on Opera, basically. Microsoft Edge. And the data comes in, so people download this onto the laptop. It collects that data. They permission what they want. That data is then sent to buyers, unlocked in that way, and then the payments are made back out to those individuals. They get up to a minimum of 70% of all the revenues. And 30% goes to Swash and the app owners, right? But this app runs, obviously, because it's a browser extension, locally on your computer. All right. Okay, let's see if we can do this now. I'm going to do a live demo, which is always tricky. All right. Can I? Oh, yeah, I can. Great. I'm going to switch to this mic. And I'm going to show you Swash in a second. Oh, computer, please don't do this to me now. Okay, I got it. Hang on. Okay, here we go. All right. So here's their website. And if you want to follow along, if anyone's got a laptop and they want to do this and download it now, it's just swashapp.io. You click on Get Swash, and it downloads the browser plugin, right? I've already downloaded it, and you can see it up here. And you can see I've already earned some crypto. Usually that comes up with a number. Yes, no. Why isn't it working? Because it's a live demo. Great. Working all day yesterday, not today. All right, so let's just click in and see the settings and see what actually this means. So you would download it, and then you'd look at, this is the bit that really counts, right? You give users some sense of control over what they actually want to share. So here are the options, right? If you go to Amazon, then you can share all of these data points here, right? Similarly with Facebook, if you go to Facebook, then again, there are all these data points. You can pick what you want and what you don't want. If you don't want anything from Facebook to be shared as part of this data, you just switch it off, right? Similarly, the search terms and surfing terms are all, 10 minutes, okay, great. They're all up there as well. Right, okay. I'm going to just take this very briefly because we're running out of time. But this is the bit that I like. You can, at the bottom here, we're trying, obviously, to maintain a sense of privacy, right? So there's a privacy slider here which will mask different elements depending on how high or low you have that slider, right? So put it right up to the top, and you're now masking the timestamp, certain crucial search terms, etc., or words in all of that. And that's really important for keeping a user's identity. And actually, you're tagging them. You're tagging users with a pseudonymous label, which gets changed out pretty regularly. And so it's really hard to de-anonymize this data set. At least that's the intention. Obviously, these things can be done, but that's the intention, right? Let me just show you this, which is a data delay. So if you don't want to send something, there's a delay on something. So let's just try this, right? Okay. I do. It's true, John. I have a crush on you. I don't know where he is. Okay, so I've typed that in, and now you can see the data points that are being collected up here, and then they're going to be sent to this data union, right? It gives me an option to delete. Let's just delete that one because I don't feel comfortable with that. But if you dig in here, you can see the kinds of things that are being sent. So it's on this data point, you're generating all of the bits of information that the results that have come from that search for I Love John Pala. And right at the bottom here, you can see the term itself. Can you read that on the screen? No, you can't. It's not high enough definition. Okay, you'll have to trust me on that one. Or just do it yourself. Then you don't have to trust me. Great. No one likes to trust anyone, Shiv. It's a Ethereum conference. What's wrong with you? All right. Look, that's a really crude overview. Now, if you're looking at it from the buyer side, you come to Streamr's marketplace, you type in Swash, and you can see that's a product that you can buy. I go along and buy it, and I go, great, this is a really interesting data set. It's a time-based license, so I can buy it for an hour. It doesn't cost me much. I can inspect the data. I can then buy it for even longer. Every time I make a payment, that all goes to the people and the members in that data union, which is, again, really exciting. It's a really exciting way of distributing the revenue that's generated from this stuff. Okay, I'm going to take you back to the slides and just finish up here. This is an appalling way of doing things, so apologies. Okay, there we go. All right. Where next? Okay, I think there's lots of benefits that data unions provide. I'm not going to go into that point by point. But I think if you kind of sit with it, you kind of realize what it does is allow people a choice over what they choose to monetize or not. It instantiates, as a meme, it instantiates this notion of ownership. You're like, oh, right, I guess this is mine, and I can sell it or not. And I think that's also a really important thing in and of itself, and it actually gives people money. And then you end up with realizing that, well, hang on, you can start to sort of port over other data sets that people create out there in the world, and that might just open them up for other people to use in a way that isn't happening now. But in regards to what we're doing with what we've got and what we've built out, let me just give you a few numbers and maybe make some promises. Oh, promises? Is that the right word? Anyway, bold statements. How much is Swash's data worth, right? We're like, okay, if we create this data set, is it going to be worth anything? Is anyone going to buy it? Well, we've had one estimation, which is that it should be worth in the region of $35 to $70 million a year. That's a lot of money that you'd be generating for a little application like that, right? And you can keep growing that. We know that because there's a similar business that does this in a centralized way that just got closed down because they were collecting it unethically, right? They're collecting the data without user consent, without a proper framework for that. So that's how much we think it's worth. And that would mean effectively distributing $50 million worth, if we take the top end of those figures, out to a data set or a number of people numbering probably maybe 2 million. So that's $25 a year. That's a decent incentivization to get people to join, right? Can it scale? Can we get to 2 million people, right? Because if Swash doesn't scale, then it's not good for anyone. Yeah, I think it could probably be, so I'm going to stand on this stage and make this bold statement. I think it'll be the biggest DApp by the time I come back here next year. And you're like, ha, scoff. That's nothing, Shiv. That's like 10,000 users and you'll be the biggest app. Yeah, well, we'll get there, and we'll get to 100,000 by the time I stand back on this stage next year. Right? That's the bold statement. Way is looking at me going, what the hell are you doing, Shiv? You did not discuss that with me. So I think it can scale, and I think it's really innovative because you don't have these onboarding issues, right? We're not asking people to buy crypto to get into this. We're just giving it to them for doing stuff that they're already doing, which is, again, a bit of a game changer in my view. Okay. Third thing, and then there's a fourth thing, and then I'm going to finish. There are more data unions coming. So it's not just Swash. There are others being built. Actually, my colleague Wei did a talk yesterday about MyDM, which is the mobile app, which measures how much you use your other apps on your mobile. And actually, that is going to be run by a DAO. So we were working with DAOstack. Could you run these things as DAOs, right? Could you have a DAO, right? A data union DAO. Yes, absolutely. And we're going to try and MVP that very soon. Wei, a week, 2 weeks, longer? Longer, maybe a month before we get to the point where we can show like a DAO running an actual revenue-generating business rather than just a glorified hedge fund. That's exciting. Okay, and the last point is the legislative wins are in our favor. GDPR, we all know about GDPR. Well, there's a little-known article in that called Article 20, which is all about portability. It means it gives users the right to port their data from one place to another. Great. Well, what if they port it to a data union, right? From Google, from Facebook. Suddenly that starts to get very interesting. The CCPA just come into force. Well, What does it say in that? It says, as a user, you have a right to tell another business to stop selling your data. So imagine Swash now has a little button which sends an automated email, which you're allowed to do as a third party, to Google, to Facebook, to whomever, not to Facebook, but to Google, saying, you're not allowed to sell my data. Great. So now I can port my data from Google and I can tell them not to sell it if we can get that legislative crossover. Great. Then data unions will be in a unique position, and they'll be the only place to rebuild the data economy based on user consent. And I think that's really fascinating. We are not far off from that being the case. And hopefully in a couple of years, that will be the case. And the data economy would have improved, therefore. And we'll have a fairer, better, and more dignified data economy. Okay, look, thank you very much. Thanks for having this. I've enjoyed it. Have we got time for questions? 1 minute, one question maybe? Is there a question? Yes. He asked, can you get the slide deck? Yeah, I'll stick it up somewhere. I'll figure it out. Yeah, I'll stick it up. So if you didn't hear the question was CCPA is about getting rid of the middleman. Aren't you bringing back the middleman? Is that a fair question? Yeah, look, to answer that in the briefest way, what is a data union? If you look at it from that perspective, it's an agent, right? Selling your data is a really hard business, right? So you doing it as an individual is nigh on impossible. You need an agent working for you because it's a complicated science, right? It involves data science, it involves marketing, it involves partnerships with other people who might want to buy the data, it involves application building. I mean, who's going to do that by themselves? No one. No one is a superhuman being to be able to do that for themselves. So you need agents working for you. And that's what data unions give. We have, interestingly, some people out there, policymakers, who are interested in bringing in dedicated data unions legislation to really enable this. And I think that's what makes it fascinating. Anyway, look, I hope that answered your question. He's not listening. He's talking to his partner. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I should get off the stage, right? Yes. All right. Great. Thank you very much for having me. I really enjoyed it.